we say this often, it's easier to open up a chicken shop than it is a gym or a health facility.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast, and today we're in London at Sweat 2020, and I've been privileged to have been asked to host a panel to talk about the opportunities within the fitness space. And it's been an interesting event. I've been listening to quite a few of the sessions that have been going on, and also talking to people in and around the event. And there's kind of a real interesting polarization in terms of conversation that's been going on. You've got one side where there's a lot of information about this $4 trillion industry that we're part of, and how a lot of the big tech companies are moving into the space because they see so much opportunity here. And on the other side, meeting a lot of small independent business owners that are kind of struggling to make ends meet, struggling to compete in a very competitive space where rents are high and staff costs are high, and everyone's fighting for a very similar audience. So the session today was to talk about the missed opportunities within the fitness space, and we were looking at different demographics and different market opportunities, and for me it was quite encouraging and inspiring to realize that there's some really interesting markets that most of us are probably not even paying any attention to, we're overlooking. Now, I'm aware there's lots of challenges about how to enter into those markets and how to create a successful strategy. But certainly, from my perspective, I think there's some huge opportunities in terms of looking at a slightly different demographic to what we're going after. The older market, the boomers, these, according to the statistics, in the UK, they hold 75% of the wealth of the nation. So these people are affluent. They're very interested in their health, they're very interested in living longer, and a lot of the conversation in this interview was really about how to tap into those, what kind of messaging, what's the experience they're looking like. So I hope you enjoy this podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts, whether it's a market that you're thinking about, whether it's a market that you've got experience in, and whether you think this is really a great opportunity, as several of us do. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and please let us know what you think. Okay, so we're here live at Sweat 2020, and I just said off camera, I've never done this live before. Normally I tell everybody, if you say something you wish you hadn't have said, we can edit it. We can't do that now. So look, thanks for joining us, everybody. We're here really to talk about the opportunities within the fitness industry, and listening to some of the presentations earlier, what struck me is, one, I didn't realize it was a $4 trillion industry, so it's a huge industry, and seems to be a lot of opportunities. On one side, we see a lot of the big companies, the big tech companies, realizing that there's a lot of opportunity in the fitness sector, so a lot of these big businesses are now muscling in. I guess one of the subjects that we wanted to talk about today really is the opportunities for the operators within the industry. And we've heard this morning about how competitive that is, and I guess really the debate is really, what opportunities are we missing? How do we go about doing that? And we've got two of our experts, which is Joan Murphy and Kenny Butler. So maybe just to give us some context, it'd be good to give us a bit of an introduction to both of you and a little bit about your background.
Sure. My name's Kenny. I am Head of Health and Wellbeing Development for ukactive. I'm a physiotherapist by background before I got into the physical activity space. My role is mainly trying to link up two parallel worlds that are the healthcare and the fitness industry, because they are two different oil tankers, but the meeting of these two systems up, I think, can do wonders for the health of the nation.
Excellent. Joan.
Very impressive. I'm Joan. I'm a co-founder and CEO of a London-based studio brand called Frame. So we started almost 11 years ago. very much one of the first in the pay-as-you-go market here, and we do cross-genre. So we're very much about getting people to do multidiscipline and making sure that people are feeling good about themselves and making exercise not a chore. So we are currently London-based, but we really believe that actually if you can get people moving more, they make better decisions in life, whether or not it's from food to relationships, to work, that healthy mindset. So we really focus on sort of how people feel as opposed to maybe more the aesthetic and sort of the typical fitness world of guilt and influences.
Right, okay. And I guess, if you generally, and I am generalizing, but in fitness, in terms of the messaging, I suppose it's very easy to tap into a younger audience, very focused on the body and results and weight loss and that kind of thing. And we were obviously talking earlier about your approach and in terms of who your audience is and how to talk to them differently and what are some of the triggers that are relevant to your market. So maybe you give us a bit of a background about that, Joan.
Yeah, absolutely. So our core market, as with most boutiques, or we like to call them group fitness studios, is 25 to 45, give or take, depending what area you're in. Pip, my business partner, and I actually created a sub-brand about 5 years ago called Mumhood. So Frame as a brand is very tongue-in-cheek. We're very much about enjoying life, making the most of life. But we did realise that when both of us have had children, so there's 4 children between us over the 10 years of a business, was that actually everyone is very, very different at that stage in their life. So we realised that in terms of the life cycle of a framer, so, when the 25-year-old has the same mindset as the 45-year-old, however, there's a period in their life cycle of being a framer that actually we needed to speak to them differently and understand sort of what they were going through at a certain time. So going back to your point, there's a real opportunity there to actually ensure that we didn't lose this really key part of the market who were already coming to Frame and they were enjoying sort of that movement inside of life, but actually we needed to look after them in another way.
Right. And how do you go about that? Is it a case of, if you're in a business and whether you're trying to tap into a sort of more mature audience or people that are having children for an example, do you have to, I suppose, get people that are in that way, so in terms of bringing on agencies and having people in your business, you have to have people that are at that stage to properly be successful at it, or how would you go about doing that?
Well, there's quite an opportunity with an aging cohort of people. I think by 2040, the 63p of every pound will be spent by an older household. So the opportunity is there to engage with that cohort of people, and they've got money to engage with boutique style fitness industry or any other part of the industry. I think you need to look at the messaging. I think we spoke about earlier about the messaging toward that cohort. It needs to be around independence and mobility rather than exercise and sport. So that might turn a few people off, and talking about disease management might turn them off as well. So talking about mobility, independence, and how they're going to interact with their grandchildren is probably a better message. Yes.
I guess when if you talk about 60, although when I was younger it sounded like a real old kind of grey-haired guy with a walking stick. Now I'm about 11 years off that. So I suppose, do you have to talk to people as though they're old, or nowadays do you have to talk to them about how they're young and because I guess when you get old you don't feel old, you still feel as though you did probably when you was in your 20s. What do you think we in general, when people try and tap into that marketplace, it's young people trying to talk to what they think is relevant to old people instead of old people how they want to feel?
I think it's super interesting actually, because I think it's all about mindset, and I think 60, the age of 60, say 20 years ago, was very different to what 60 is today. So I think people's perception has changed, And at 60, they're not like thinking, oh, life's going to end and I'm going to watch Coro all day. I think people really want to live a full life, is what we see. And, you know, when I generalise and say 25 to 45 is as our core market, that's where the bulk comes. But, you know, as soon as we put on like friends and family days at Frame, everyone brings their mums and dads along and they have a really great time. And it's really about a mindset. They're all out doing things. Like you say, they've got the disposable income. But it is really, it's no different to when we started Frame. And we purposely launched in somewhere called Shoreditch, which people thought we were absolutely mad because it's not it was more of a creative area, wasn't a typically sort of outdoorsy area and not overly wealthy. But we wanted to tap into a market that were not gym goers, were people who weren't currently going. So we did pay as you go, and we were trying to grow a new market. So we weren't trying to steal from the gym. So I think if you think about that in the context of, say, a boutique and what it can do, it's around the messaging and how you tap into the mindset of someone and make them welcome in a space. So I think that was kind of what the boutiques had done to, say, people who didn't want to do PE because it was sport, like you were saying. But what it did is it gave it sort of more, it put it closer to a going out and an experience so they could relate to it more. And I think that's probably with an older generation as well. It's like, well, what do you need to tweak, or how do you want to communicate? You know, my mum would kill me if I said, do you want to go to the seniors class? However, she does go to Pilates every week, but she doesn't want to be labelled that. So I think you're right. Is it like, how do you get that messaging right?
Yeah. I know the essence of a boutique is it is very niche and specialist, and it really talks to the person. Is that I guess there are a lot of opportunities outside of the millennial, which I guess you normally associate with boutiques. Do you think there's a big opportunity, but the key is really being able to understand how to talk directly to that person? You know, we talked about the correct me if I'm, but the mumhood. Yeah. So I suppose again, when I was younger, you kind of, you know, when people were pregnant, they kind of covered themselves up, and you sort of, you know, the clothes you wore were different. Nowadays on social media, you kind of see a lot of these influencers, and it's all showing, and they're proud of their bump, and so is that the art? Is it really just being able to kind of understand where people are now and what is cool for that particular, or what inspirational for that type of person?
Yeah, I think it's all a journey, and we kind of explain it as like a bell curve. It's like 9 months in, 9 months out, and the hormonal change and the physical abilities and sort of maybe the support network that you have really changed through that period. So it's about sort of communicating and talking to somebody in a sort of time appropriate sort of way. And I think, you know, not bagging social media, but it does put a lot more pressure now on, say, people to snap back, for example, or for people to think, well, this is what I should be doing even when I'm pregnant. So I guess it's one thing, it's great because you know, people are motivated to move more. However, you know, it's putting more pressure on people to think, well, I should be able to do all of these things. You see someone who's, you know, doing a handstand, but they're like a professional athlete, for example. Well, that's not really okay for the person who's been going to yoga every other week for the last couple of months. So I think it's really interesting, in like programming especially, you know, we need to take responsibility for making sure that it's at the right level and knowing the audience. So I think the rise of social media has created a lot more pressure on different markets, and I don't think that's just the pre and postnatal market. You know, like teenagers, for example, you know, that's a big area where there's such a dropout rate. Come 11 and 13-year-old girls, you know, what can we do about that group? I mean, they would die to be in these studios, these boutique experiences. So we have a couple of schools, anywhere that we're local to schools, we do sort of some cross classes with them. You know, we have these inspiring teachers, the music that they like. So I think when we talk about broadening the market and what like boutiques can do, is there's definitely areas to explore.
I guess with social media, it's very quick, it's very shallow, it's a scroll, and it, in a lot of cases it's visual. Do you think, you know, whether you know, if you're tapping into channels outside of the traditional channels, there's, you know, if you do it well, there's opportunities to use stories to be able to kind of educate people, as like you gave the example of, you know, people want to, you know, if they have children, the pressure is to get back and get the six-pack instantly. Do you think there's an opportunity to kind of maybe explain to people what is the best way to do that, do you think?
100%. And I think that's a duty of care situation. And I think, again, with the rise of social media, you know, there are people giving messages that aren't qualified. And I also think the industry, we have to stay up to date. So we got accredited by Active IQ for a training academy so that we could keep up to date and make sure that the messaging and the stuff, the information going to the trainers is right. And I think at that point we need to think about, right, well, what is safe? Like, we as the professionals need to know what is safe, but also we need to get the messaging out there of, you know, giving people the tools. So I think, you know, you need to have the tools yourself. You need to take responsibility to not do things that are silly, but conversely, if they come into our spaces, we need to program things in the right way.
So Kenny, you were talking about the initiative, certainly from the UK government, to again get more people active in the older in an older age group. You know, how do you think? Because obviously it's an obvious thing. You know, everybody needs to be active. My parents need to be active, but you know, it seems as though there's a general one-size-fits-all message, and in a lot of cases they just go along because it's the only option. But how do you think how do you think you could go about, I suppose, from a business perspective, tapping into some of the financial opportunities? But then, what do you think are some of the things that are required to do a good job at you know, bringing in the boomers, for example, that don't exercise?
You're right. It is a governmental. It's a governmental industrial strategy challenge, actually. So one of four, alongside the environment, clean growth, mobility, and that's healthy aging. So Theresa May announced those 4 industrial strategy challenges 2017. It's just not here though, it's global. It's a global challenge, the healthy aging and the social care that might result of people being inactive. But I think there's 10 million of us that will make it to 100 that are currently living. So we've, in the UK, 10 million of us will reach 100.
Wow.
So now, as we get older, there's a lot of people who are inactive with long-term conditions and take up half the GP appointments. And there lies some of our problems. So focusing on physical activity, and we've got the space in our industry, in this industry as well, to be able to get people more active, to focus on that, because you can prevent and delay social care with physical activity. Because aging and loss of fitness is often confused. You know, so being physically, mentally, and emotionally active often helps with the aging process. Now, you have to be lucky with some diseases that you're born with, of course, and environmental issues. But for the most part, it is confused with a loss of fitness, aging that is.
Yeah.
So, you know, real opportunity for a space. You know, there's an army of personal trainers and exercise professionals out there that are already talking health to some way, to some capacity.
Do you think that there's a lot of personal trainers, but they're at a certain age where they're not relating to the people that they're trying to tap into? Like, I know, I'll use my dad again, you know, we talk the same language, but in some cases we talk totally different language, you know, and I'm not that much different, you know, I'm only 20 years. Do you think that some of the challenges that I can't understand what my dad's going through mentally, just the same as I can't understand what I'm going through mentally now than what I was 10 years ago? You know, you kind of getting your head around different stage of life. Do you think that's, I suppose, an opportunity for different people to get involved, or, you know, have we got to look at the sort of trainers that we've got?
Absolutely. We've got a lot of work to do to prepare the workforce for someone who's coming in with 5, 6 long-term conditions. And that's not uncommon at 70, 80 years old. But we're already doing it. There's already people out there, and there's accreditation already looking at long-term conditions. So yes, the workforce has to have some empathy with that cohort of people. But some people may want to have that younger personal trainer. Others may want to have someone more their age with more empathy. There is one of our biggest members who is actually putting a over 55 personal trainer in 100 of their gyms. So, you know, those are the things that are happening at the moment in this industry. And it's a market. People need to realize it's a market that's just going to get bigger and bigger. And there's a need. It's not just like a market. There's a need from a healthcare societal perspective as well. But yeah, the workforce is really important.
Can I just lead on from that?
Yeah.
Is that I think there's a real issue in sort of the career progression within the industry. So I think with fitness as a whole, if we kind of lump it all in together, I think there is an issue with like qualifying and people wanting to know and seeing where the careers go. So I think there's some work to be done on mapping out like what can you do, because I feel we you know, and I only operate in London and in a niche section, but you know, I think people can't really see where their future is. And you know, I think you've got a 26-year-old now may still want to be in the fitness industry at 56, but you don't have a huge cohort of people coming through that are currently 45 going to be personal trainers at 55. So you're going to have to attract people into the market if you want to have this over 55 group of trainers who are going to understand and relate to those people. Yeah. So I think like it's the same thing that we have as the studios and the boutiques and the gyms really up their game in classes. That's why we had to create Academy, so we could take people from no training to become trainers. But same thing, if you're going to look at the boomer population, where are those relatable people going to come from? Yeah. How are you going to attract them in? And something that's really, really hard for us is like, they can't teach like hard classes for a long period of time. They can go into personal training, but then how is that funded? How do you get rid of that preconception around fitness? I think you touched on it, mobility and movement and that kind of thing, rather than sport. Because if they haven't been doing it, how do you break that barrier to be like, oh, actually, this is something I could enjoy doing? Yeah. So I think there's a big piece around the trainer.
Yeah, I was talking to Michelle from David Lloyd earlier, and you know, they've gone into the boutique market, opening boutiques, and one of the challenges, even in the UK, which you would think is quite a developed market, is getting good instructors that are able to do that. And that's in the core fitness market, where you'd think there's thousands of people to go and tap into. So I suppose now, when you're looking at other populations, is there anything that exists that is able to train people to have those kind of skills that you know of?
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah, there is. There's accreditation bodies out there that are currently accrediting people to be comfortable with the long-term conditions and what that means. Long-term conditions, diabetes, hypertension, obesity. That is something that perhaps in the boutique industry we're not used to receiving. So there is accreditation, there's training out there that is currently underway.
I'd love to know though how many people actually sign up to it.
Yeah, that's
because
right.
even I struggle like with our pre and postnatal course. It's accredited. Yeah. We have an extra day on it because we don't believe that the amount of time that you get for the theory section is enough. But recruiting the leads and the people onto the course, because like I was going back to the career piece, like it's all well and good having the accreditation, but it's the volume of people coming in. Because we're growing exponentially. Where are the people coming from?
Do you think people just either are not interested or they don't realise that it's a good opportunity, a good long-term opportunity to get trained in that? You know, it's certainly, until we had this conversation, I wouldn't even think or recommend someone to do it because I wouldn't have understood it. But what do you think is sort of stopping more people thinking about it and deciding to train up for this opportunity that
From a trainer's perspective?
Yeah, from a trainer's perspective.
I think awareness of the market. It's a scary territory for some people to go into an area where they're not comfortable with. I think those two factors, the awareness and the fact that it's out of their comfort zone, is probably why there's not as many people taking that up. But I think as we get this message out, people will be needing to do that, wanting to do that, because it's going to be the business is going to be dependent on it. Their diversification is going to be dependent on that, and there's a lot of people out there who need it.
So like, let's talk money, because my guess is that what's going to make this work is entrepreneurs, business people realizing that there's money to be made in here and then investing and creating boutiques. Just, I suppose, similar to what's happening in the traditional fitness market. How big, is there any information about how big an opportunity it is? Because if you look at certainly some of the people I've been talking about today in the traditional boutiques, a lot of them there's the odd one that's making money, but a lot of them are struggling. It's a very difficult business model to be really successful with. Is this a good business opportunity, and if so, why is it any different to anything else?
I'm happy to try that one. It's
Well done.
70% of the wealth in this country is is in the hands of over 55s.
70.
70.
Right.
So there's the market. So there's a need for diversification. The messaging, the types of exercise and activity that's on offer, the training, as of course, the comfort levels of people who are coming in and out. People might want to come as groups or versus one-on-one. That we need to sort of look at what the offering is from our industry and make links with people like the NHS as well. When we speak about money, you know, there's not all about, well, there's a lot of commercialization of this, but at the same time, there is a saving of UK PLC's money as well, because someone who's 75, inactive, long-term, with 4 long-term conditions is really expensive. Very, very expensive. So if we can get them into our spaces, that's a lot less expensive by preventing that social care.
You know, like when it comes to getting the government to do anything, even decide whether they're going to stay in or stay out, it seems to be a very long and slow process. You know, when we explain off camera, you know, the amount of money it costs and how easy it would be to prevent some of this stuff. It seems as though government's got so much going on that they're not really going to do a lot about it very quickly, is my view. I may be wrong, but I suppose an entrepreneur, they can spot an opportunity, they can raise some money, they can do something about it. And, you know, what do you think about the business community being more effective at kind of, you know, developing this market than relying on government? I know that's your job, so I'm not trying to...
Go ahead.
I think, interestingly, I think there's big opportunities for the big boxes here, because I don't think anyone kind of puts their hands up and really welcomes in, and I'm no expert in big boxes. So, but from what I see, you know, I would imagine in the boomer market, like if I knew that I could go to a safe place and people knew sort of how to deal with me, or I'm a reasonably experienced fitness person, or I'm new to the journey, I feel like on the commercial financial point, you know, like you're saying, like if I knew that I could have a person who's at the same life stage as me, I can talk through what I'm going through as a personal trainer, if they've got the wealth, and this is very much a social class situation, like if they have the wealth and they can go to a club and they know they can be supported with somebody who can understand, you can see how that can change. But you know, that is only a certain portion of the population who is going to be able to do that.
We need to echo that completely. We need to be given a break as well. The industry needs to be given a break from the government as well. Sort of, it's with taxes, rents, and business rates, for instance. But we say this often: it's easier to open up a chicken shop than it is a gym or a health facility. You know, that needs to change as well. So we need to get some help from the government. But we also need to, as an industry, diversify and work out what the offer is. Because it's new to everybody. We've never had this demographic increase before. So there's exciting opportunities and some challenges, but I think we got some work to do, as well as asking for a little help.
Yeah. What do you think about, again, this event is talking about boutique, it's talking about young people, it's six packs in general. What do you think is the, I suppose, you know, what do you think would need to change to be exciting for this different audience then? And why, if there's so much money, you know, 75% of the wealth are in these older people, you know, why do you think we're not going after them? And are they a better group of people to be going after than the younger ones because they're a lot more loyal? I know there's sort of 3 questions rolled in one, but...
I think it's an interesting, it's kind of a life cycle, a life journey, I guess, in the industry, because I think if, you know, in 20 years' time, like we were saying earlier, like 60, 20 years ago is different to 60 today. And I think, you know, in 20 years' time, all those 30-year-olds are going to be 50, and it's just going to be a part of their life. I guess there is a section there of what is the motivation and why would somebody take up moving? So I guess, if it hasn't been a part of your life and, it's something you're thinking about picking up, you've got all that amazing research around like This Girl Can, there's definitely something like that around that sort of boomer generation and what are they scared of and why aren't they going to do those things? And actually it's like, okay, well, I've actually got some time now. I guess time is something that you don't have as I don't have as a working mum, but if I had time, wonderful, I'd love to do all of these things. But actually that group you're saying, those 60 plus, it probably wasn't a part of their life. So we need to find out what that motivation is in order to get them to move.
Yeah, there's numerous barriers, isn't there?
Yeah.
Financial. We also haven't talked about loneliness. I mean, it's one big factor for getting them out into our spaces or in a green space, wherever that might be. But social isolation is like smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Really? That's the health impact of that. So getting these people out of the house socially, we have to really focus on the social aspect of this as well. And cafes, there's a really good organization, and I think they're Scottish based, called Weekday Wow Factor. And Weekday Wow Factor. So they get people over 55, 65, various cohorts of people in that age bracket, and they'll go clubbing on a Wednesday. Clubbing.
What kind of clubbing?
So probably cups of tea, but be music, and they'll sort of or whatever the drink of choice might be. But the point is that they get together as a group and do something in the middle of the week that they wouldn't do on a Friday or Saturday night, but involves physical activity. So our boutique industry would be really well placed for some really loud music if they want it. That decade, whatever they find most something that they relate to, and off you go. So there's space. We've got space to do things with and bring people as groups.
I think that loneliness point is really interesting though, because actually it's not just the boomers. So, and I think, so we've just started a walking club at Frame, and on a Sunday, every other Sunday, people just get together in a green space around London. It's free to turn up to, and you go for a walk, because we know that nature's really good for people. We're in the middle of London, and London's a big lonely place for some people. They may be brand new here, they may not know anybody, and actually we know that for mental health it's a really great thing, and so it fits with our purpose of Frame. But actually just those things, it doesn't cost anything. We have one motivated team member who'll go and take everyone out for a walk, and I think there are small things that we can do that don't have to cost much, that can be a tea and some music, but actually brings people together. So we've been talking a lot today about the digital sphere, but it's what is that motivation and what do those people need? And sometimes it is just someone to go for a walk with, or to have a time in the diary to turn up to, because I think that's where the sort of studio world does really well, is that actually all you have to do is turn up at a time, and then the rest is taken care of. Whereas that's where the gym market is different, where you've got to turn up and you've got to motivate yourself. If you haven't got the money for a personal trainer, it's kind of all on you, right? So that's what the boutique kind of market can offer to the different generations, to the different markets. It's like, hey, I've got that date in my diary and I'm going to look forward to tomorrow because I'm going to catch up with, Martha, and we're going to go and do the thing, and then I know I'm going to do that next week.
Do you think that the experience itself needs to be tailored slightly differently? Again, when you think of boutique, you think of dark rooms, sort of disco lights, very loud music. Would that work for, and again, we're talking of sort of boomers as an example, but do you think that physical experience would need to be adaptive? And if so, how?
Horses for courses, I think is the expression, isn't it? Some people might like that. Some people might want to be zip wiring or doing ballroom dancing. It just doesn't matter. We just need to make sure the offer is diversified and there's choice, really, sort of for someone to give people choice to go out and do something. It doesn't really matter what that is.
Yeah. And with the, I'll come back to messaging again then. So it sounds like one of the big things that needs to be sort of figured out is how to communicate to the different areas. And I know we spoke earlier about, if you don't necessarily want to be labelled. We talk about sort of like the younger teenage girls, for example, and then the other people at the end where they don't want to be called a a senior or a boomer or what are some of your thoughts in terms of the messaging and how you can be niche so people feel as though they're being talked to directly, but you're not necessarily labeling people either into a box that they may not want to go into?
Is that one for me?
I think so.
I think again, it's around, for us, we focus on positivity. So you're trying to bring the positives out. So I think it doesn't matter if you're talking to a 13-year-old or a 83-year-old. I think around that messaging needs to be sort of age appropriate, obviously. But you need to sort of talk to people in a way that they relate to, but keep things in a positive and why they can do things, because there's so much around your mindset and how you can do things, because I think that is probably one of the fears for people, is that I can't do that, or it might be too hard, and this is about the barriers, and I think the brand needs to speak to people, so through like the This Girl Can research that they need to be able to sort of relate to the people in the images. They need to feel comfortable with the wording, so you don't want, my personal opinion, and it's only an opinion, is like quite often you'll end up with quite formal writing when it's people of an older generation. It becomes a bit serious, and can we make it a little bit more lighthearted? And it's the same, I spoke to you earlier about like mumhood, when we created that as a sub-brand. Just because I'm pregnant, I'm not like mummy and bean, I'm still Joan and baby, and I think thinking about age appropriateness, thinking about what's relatable, and imagery is so important. It's like, can I see myself doing that? Can I put myself in that place? Or, do I feel like I will be around people who will be similar to me?
Yeah, because you purposely don't use imagery, is that correct?
Yeah. So as Frame as a brand, we stick away from all models and influencers. We use framers. They might be from the front of house. We might be doing a shoot. We'll ask some clients if they want to join, because it is more real and relatable. And I think, again, there's a lot of research around like people wanting to feel comfortable. And I think that's where our industry has a bit of work to do on, the aspirational images that we put out there. They could be quite damaging. And I think, as soon as someone's not sure, it puts a barrier up. They may want to be at that place at some point, but I think, making it relatable.
Yeah, and we got to be clever with our marketing, I guess. As soon as I think you said it earlier, I think as soon as you label something as for an aging person, they won't buy it. So we need to sort of be clever with how we package that offer up. Bite size, entry level stuff, figure out what we already know, kind of, that going back to your point earlier, they're a relatively loyal cohort of people, actually. It's just that there's not enough of them. So when they do come and engage with our spaces, they're pretty loyal. We do know that. We know what they're doing as well. More gentle, low impact stuff like Tai Chi, yoga, swimming. So that packaging that offer up and making sure that there's empathy and the right messaging there, I think we've got, and then we're winning if we get there.
Do you think by thinking of, I suppose we think of fitness, I think of fitness as an example as a kind of gym type of studio experience. Do you think, to tap into some of those areas, you could sort of start with a clean sheet of paper and say, well, actually, what is fitness? Is it using a piece of equipment, or could it? You talk about walking. That's interesting. That's obviously there's a lot of benefits in terms of that. Is there an opportunity to kind of rethink that whole space? So because even friends I know of my age, they don't go into gyms because they don't like gym people and what it looks like. So, do you think
I'm the same?
You think it's kind of like maybe there's a space that's not yet been created that can create give that activity and that movement and that community, but maybe that's not what we think a gym should look like.
I think I think we've got the know-how, we've got the technical ability. The boutique industry especially can create a space that I heard someone speaking about, instead of having a pole in the middle of the room, have a tree, or a fake tree, whatever that looks like, with rope around it. That was interesting. We've got the industry to be able to sort of create those spaces that are more attractive and welcoming.
There's a brand in Australia, I don't know its name, but there is a brand in Australia. I think a lot of things come out of New Zealand and Australia because that's been a part of our lives for as long as I've known. But I know there's a brand in Sydney that's doing that. It's very much, it is just a sort of an older demographic. It kind of has not quite as hardcore everything. It's just a more attainable version of things. And I think there's absolutely an opportunity for entrepreneurs and people to think about it. But I think, again, it comes down to messaging and thinking, well, who is my market? How big is my market? Where I am? You know, it doesn't make sense for Frame to do that in central London. However, if Frame is in sort of, I don't know, Guildford, maybe it would be a good place to do it there. Like, what is the market in your local area and what do they do, I guess?
Yeah.
And there's Homebound people as well that this industry could reach via technology.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already happening
True.
in certain ways, and certain companies are doing
Well, they were
that.
talking about Peloton, how they managed to be very successful at creating an experience that some fitness clubs can't. So I suppose that's an interesting point there.
It is, and I don't, you know, the infrastructure is getting better and better. I don't buy it that nobody has the internet and has a mobile phone, etc. I don't buy that. I think they're one of the biggest users of Facebook, aren't they? Over 50, over 65s or something. But bringing this industry and the skill set and these products into the home is a real opportunity for 5 million homebound that, you know, would not otherwise engage with us. So
there's 5 million in the UK homebound, is that right? They're just meaning they can't leave the house.
that they can't, and have a variety of barriers to do so.
It's interesting you talk about Peloton though. My 82-year-old father still puts his road bike on his wind trainer, pops on the TV, like he's got a big wall TV, and I was maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, he had a bit of an accident, so he was only riding on the bike in the house. So I bought him some CDs so he could watch them. So it's kind of like the 80-year-old's version of Strava. But because he lost his confidence because he had an accident, but then he managed to get back out again. And I think to your point, that home piece is a really big piece.
On cycling and spinning at home, there is, I can't remember the name of it now, but there is a company that is, you use Google Maps. So you're cycling, and in order to move the Google Maps along, you have the cycle. And you can have a trip down memory lane, basically, of where you used to live or where. So, and that's on a TV screen. Yeah. So it's relatively easy to do. The technology is there to sort of be more mobile via some technology. And I think that's probably where we could really sort of go right into the home with our product.
Have you guys seen or heard of any brands that do other I guess demographics really well, that in any even parallel industries, I suppose, hospitality or retail or anything like that?
Virtual reality is up and coming as well for the homebound, not just for getting more people active, but for rehab. In actual fact, that's where it started, sort of rehab after shoulder surgery, or actually to move your arm up above your head with virtual reality. But now that's something many people can't do for sustained periods without surgery, without an injury, because they're so inactive and unfit. So bringing that into the spaces as well is pretty exciting.
So takeaways then, to wrap up, like one of the things I suppose I didn't realize is just the amount of money that's in the boomer sector. There certainly seems to be a lot of potential money for people to spend it on feeling better and living longer, which I guess when you get to that age, that's a key driving factor, isn't it? You want to live forever, I suppose, but not just live forever, but be able to have a good quality of life. What are some of the other points then that you think are worth leaving with, or just sort of summarising in terms of the opportunities?
Top line statement, I think for me, would be focus on physical activity to avoid or prevent or delay social care.
Excellent. Anything from you, Joan?
Yeah, I think it's just understanding the motivation and why people would want to do it. So I think it kind of comes back to the messaging, the branding, and sort of making it inviting and welcoming to come in, because I think there's still a lot we can do in every sector, every area of our sector, to sort of make it more approachable and break those barriers down.
Yeah, I think just to wrap up, I'm sure there are businesses doing this. They certainly don't seem to hit the headlines like other, SoulCycle, for example. Everybody knows that. I don't see or hear about, even if they are there, I suppose, businesses that do, think outside the box, go after other opportunities. So I suppose, for me, it's kind of quite exciting. As a business person, I'm starting to think about all these different product ideas for, in home. But I suppose it's just trying to get that conversation going and getting people to think about, look, rather than looking at what everybody else is doing and coming up with another version of that, maybe thinking out the box a little bit more, because there's certainly a lot of white space and a lot of opportunity to be part of that $4 trillion industry, as they say. So thank you so much for your time. Thanks to our guests here, and hope it's been useful. And good luck with tapping into that market. Thank you very much.
Cheers.